Hello everybody and welcome back. As always, I am Mateo311 and this is your channel for everything VR related. Today, we're checking out VR's all-time best top 10 games before the Meta Quest became the dominant VR platform. So this is basically a look back at the all-time best PCVR and PlayStation VR 1 titles. It's also a great comparison of where VR games used to be between 2016 through 2020 and where they are now. Now there are of course links and timestamps if you want to skip ahead, but let's start this list off in chronological order. All the way back in 2016, the studio Ready at Dawn, who previously launched many successful titles, decided to take a chance on VR by creating Lone Echo. Now to date, not only does this game still have some of the best graphics we've ever seen in VR, it also delivers one of the most immersive and deeply compelling storylines. And just to give you an example of how they nail it, your average VR game has you performing some generic tasks to repair items, which is generally quite mundane and just helps pad out the game's timing. But when it comes to Lone Echo, they're going to have you doing the same repair while hanging outside of a space station located millions of miles away from Earth, and then the already breathtaking planet-filled background gets disrupted by some crazy anomaly, blasting you untethered out into space. So what I'm saying here is the storyline is really cool and immersive, and I love it. And this is what we got all the way back in 2016 from the studio that Meta eventually acquired and then kicked to the curb before they got to work on the new IP that they had planned. Now it's easy to just completely blame Meta for this, but I did hear some internal rumors that both Ready at Dawn and Meta just never really got along. But back in the early days, plenty of studios were playing nice with VR, and the best collaboration has to go to Capcom with Resident Evil 7. Unlike Resident Evil 8 and the Resident Evil 4 remake, Resident Evil 7 was made specifically for VR. So not only did we get a AAA, one-of-a-kind Resident Evil experience, but we also got a game that knew how to play to the strength of VR. Characters get right up in your face during cutscenes, in-game hallucinations have you trying to smack bugs off your hands, and instead of a Resident Evil with the action turned up to 12, we got a much more physically immersive world that's made so much more bone-chilling when it's played in VR. Now on the topic of games that knew how to play to the strength of VR, we have VR's all-time #1 platformer, Astro Rescue Mission. Again, you could clearly see the developers knew how to utilize VR, as not only do they constantly play with scale, but they're also putting you on high-speed roller coasters, diving down into the ocean, and even forcing you to physically interact with the game as you need to duck away from enemy attacks. Now staying on the topic of Astrobot, I absolutely love the flat screen PlayStation 5 Astrobot that recently released, but it's a massive crime that it didn't come to the PlayStation VR 2. Now, if you thought Astrobot would be the only platformer on today's list, well, guess what? You're wrong. We also got Moss Book 1 way back in 2017, and if you're actually wondering why I'm mentioning this game, you must have never experienced it in its full glory. When Moss originally released, not only was this an excellent platformer with clever puzzles, a touching storyline, and solid combat mechanics, but it also had an absolutely insane attention to detail with stunning graphics. I always mention how scale becomes such a powerful tool in VR, and when your worldview becomes that of a tiny mouse, there's an absolutely incredible amount of beautiful detail to be found in both the background and foreground. And I'm yet to even mention just how lovable Quill is. I challenge you to walk away from this game not feeling like you made a new best friend. Quill is the absolute chillest and coolest VR character, and once again to mention the level of detail in this game, she actually replies to you at times in ASL sign language. Now moving on from the game that surprisingly stole my heart, we have another beloved OG experience, but this one just wasn't for me. Orbus VR was the first MMO for the industry, and it definitely went through some rough up and down patches. Overall, it did feel like an old school MMO with some cleverly implemented VR mechanics, but it just didn't feel right to me as a VR title. Now I know this isn't the case for everyone, as there was a strong community around this game for quite some time, but those days have gone and passed. If you are itching for a new VR MMO, you should probably keep your eyes on Eldrimor Haven in the Mist, as in many ways it's a spiritual successor to Orbus VR. But there was actually another massive MMO out there that took on a whole new life for VR players. CCP gave us a VR dogfighting version of their MMO title EVE Online. It featured both a single-player campaign and online PvP modes, but unfortunately it was shut down back in 2022. There are still some tricks out there to get the single player version to run, but otherwise this game is a thing of the past. My main takeaway here is that I miss the days when studios were excited for VR and jumped right into the industry guns blazing. Now guns blazing ties right into our next game, but first I need to make a little confession. This is generally where I mention the narrative-driven sci-fi shooter Farpoint, which I personally love and believe deserves a spot on this list, but then my audience chimes in and says I forgot about Blood and Truth. Well, my confession is I never got around to playing that game, but I've heard from so many people that it is absolutely fantastic. I would jump back in right now, but unfortunately I gave away my original PlayStation VR. But speaking of games worth jumping back into, I'm sure most VR gamers didn't even know we had a built from the ground up VR RPG that not only had stunning graphics, but also a 50+ hour single player campaign. I'm of course talking about the original Asgard's Wrath before Meta acquired Cinzaro and forced their sequel to be Quest exclusive. That being said though, the second game in the series is significantly better in every way except for graphical fidelity. Now, right around the same time, we got an extremely unique, one-of-a-kind game, and that was Boneworks from Stress Level 0. This was pretty much the first VR game to go all in on physics-based combat and locomotion. For the first time ever, you can physically interact with everything, experiencing a new level of immersion. Any object you see can be used as a weapon, you have to physically pry off robots that jump on your face, and you never know what to expect next from this title. At the time, it felt so uniquely new and fresh, and it became the poster child for a VR game that pushes the limits. Now, we did eventually get a follow-up title called Bone Lab, but it just didn't have the same physics backbone as the original Boneworks title. And Stress Level 0 is still working hard to deliver the full Boneworks experience onto a mobile platform. And let's finally finish today's list off with the obvious best game before Meta started to take over. Half-Life Alyx has been repeatedly touted as not only VR's best looking game, but also the best storyline and physical interactions. Similar to Boneworks, it's the type of game that you want to investigate every nook and cranny, or just mess around with every single object you come across. Now at this point, I'm assuming you're very familiar with Half-Life Alyx, so rather than going on and on about this game, let me just recommend the Return to Rapture mod, which drops you right back into the world of BioShock by utilizing official assets from the original games. Now just a heads up though, this mod is definitely on the creepy side, so if you can't handle VR horror, you might want to skip on this one. Now that right there was my top 10 games, but don't tune out just yet, because first of all, I want to hear down in the comments which games you guys think I may have missed, and I also want to spend a minute talking about how there is some nostalgia going on right now. Things were not 1000% better back in the PCVR days of 2019 and 2020. It might look like we dropped an incredible lineup, but this was only 10 games over 4 years and split across 3 different VR platforms. So quality games were few and far between, and most studios were not doing well developing for PCVR. So for better or worse, the industry moved towards the Meta Quest. But I will finish off this video by saying even the VR demos and mini games felt way cooler in the OG PCVR days, and we had experiences like Air Car or a demo for the upcoming Spider-Man movie. Valve's collection of mini games, The Lab, is still fun today. And even a lot of the smaller projects of this time, like Space Pirate Trainer and Until You Fall, hold a very special place in my heart. But that right there was today's video, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Again, I want to hear your comments, and if you're new here, please consider subscribing.